You can have people walk all over you and you won't say a word. Your time is not valuable. Your labor is also not valuable because you're chill. You have to be nice to everyone, right? Now you know that's not true, but this is exactly what you communicate to others with a lack of boundaries. People can't respect your boundaries if you don't establish them. And that is why this video is all about boundaries for people who suffer from chronic people pleasing, or if you just struggle with setting boundaries in general. Whether you are a part-time or full-time people pleaser, it is time to leave those people pleasing habits back in the dust so as to avoid yourself from being drained. We're gonna talk all about protecting your energy, setting boundaries to make yourself and your loved ones comfortable, and to protect your relationships and yourself. This is episode 9 of Becoming DISScomfortable, a podcast dedicated to helping Gen Z becoming the best versions of themselves. Today's topic was a requested one, and rightfully so, because boundaries will literally make or break the quality of your relationships. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, and they also make other people respect you more. They are rules or limitations we set to protect ourselves and our relationships. They're just a form of healthy communication. They often bring quite a bit of discomfort, especially for people who are very used to people pleasing as a form of people pleaser. Been there, done that, not fun, not anymore. You have to ask yourself, and you gotta be very honest here, why do you find setting boundaries so difficult? Is it around everyone or just certain people? Is it around yourself too? Because there is such thing as self-boundaries as well. Is it because you feel people might leave you? You think they'll dislike you or they'll cut you off? Or maybe you are afraid to cut them off? Is it because you think you're gonna offend someone? You're gonna lose out on an opportunity? A job opportunity? Are you gonna leave money on the table? When you respect yourself enough and you know what your boundaries are, what you are and are not comfortable with, and things that are absolutely non-negotiable that are affecting the quality of your life, no matter what this person's relationship is to you, they could be a family member, they can have a very close relationship with you, no matter how much money you might be being offered, no matter how cool the opportunity is, if certain boundaries are violated, which are absolutely non-negotiable, if they are violated, you will walk away. Oftentimes, people pleasers struggle with offending someone, walking away without hurting the other person, and absolutely all of those points are valid, but like, at what cost? You can't be nice to others without being nice to yourself. And right now, you're not being very nice to yourself. When you're letting people walk over you, and if you keep doing this, you'll notice a tendency that people pleasers have. They end up becoming so drained and exhausted. Ultimately, it will disrupt the quality of your relationships, it'll disrupt the quality of your life, and you are going to be incredibly drained. So, to avoid that, we're going to be going over 3 main types of boundaries. We're going to talk about boundaries with people in your life. This includes romantic partners, family, friends, acquaintances, people you have to see on a day-to-day basis, to professional boundaries in the workplace, at school, if you're running a business, and number 3, your relationship to yourself. Because yes, there is such thing as self-boundaries, and these are probably the most important, and they're going to determine the quality of the rest of your relationships with other people and the boundaries you're able to set with them. It is okay to say no. However, there are certain ways that you go about it. So I'm also going to be including examples of how you can comfortably say no to someone without being super apologetic, but also without being mean. We don't want to be mean, we don't want to be rude, but at the same time, we also want to be nice to ourselves. And we want to make sure that we are not being taken advantage of, we're not taking on more burdens than we can handle or should handle. An example of the boundaries that I set in my relationships are: I don't tolerate disrespect, I don't tolerate dishonesty, and I will not have you wasting my time. These are the 3 non-negotiables. Now, these might sound very straightforward, but the reality is people can't read your mind. It is up to you to enforce your boundaries in order for people to actually follow them and accept them. For example, if somebody's showing up late, devaluing your time, you have to understand that your time is valuable. Your resources, your labor, you are valuable. And just as you respect other people's boundaries, if you make it clear that I'm not the type of girl that will have her time wasted, people will either learn to respect that or they won't. And if they won't, in that case, you walk away Bye. That's it. You're not being mean, you're not being rude, you were simply honoring a promise that you made to yourself. Once you have these non-negotiables down, it's time to market yourself appropriately so that you can convey them to other people. Your boundaries are specific to you. Your boundaries do not have to match those of that influencer online. It really just depends on your lifestyle. I don't care what relation this person has to you. They can share your blood. They can be a relative. They can be someone very close to you. The beautiful thing about boundaries is that they need to remain rooted within who you are as a person. You don't make exceptions. With boundaries, there are no exceptions for people. And that is how you stand on business. You don't need to be making a certain amount of money to be respected and to enforce these boundaries. You don't need to look a certain way. No, every person has the right to establish boundaries. When I go out now, when I meet with friends and family, anybody, the conversations that we have, the things that people say to me are very different from 5 to 6 years ago when I was a complete and utter people pleaser, letting people walk all over me. That doesn't happen anymore. And I don't even need to say it. Like, I don't need to verbally communicate to people because they already know. Based off of my body language, basically, when you honor yourself, respect yourself, and treat yourself a certain way, it pushes people to treat you at least at the same level, if not above that. If you're the type of girl who gets disrespected and lets that slide, you best believe that that is going to happen again. And from multiple individuals, it will keep happening again and again until you enforce those boundaries, until you are willing to leave what does not serve you and walk away. In order to truly find out if something is serving you or not, you have to set up the boundaries and you have to enforce them. And if people agree with them, great, you can continue on. However, if they don't, this is a sign that you don't want, these are the exact people that you don't want in your life. You want to repel these types of people. Maybe say you go from your people-pleasing tendencies to finally starting to establish boundaries, and now suddenly people are mad at you. They're like, oh, you've changed, what's wrong? These are the people that you need to run from. Like, this is your sign to run as far as you can. There will be people out there who will try to devalue you, who will try to tell you that your boundaries or your standards are too high, also that they can keep accessing you at a discount. And this ties back to respecting yourself and developing a strong self-concept, which is something I'll cover in another video, so stick around for that. So if you're confused about how you communicate boundaries to people, it's actually a lot simpler than you might think. Obviously, verbally makes sense, but it's not always ideal. And I think in the beginning, you might have to go verbally and actually communicate to people, like using your words. But eventually, once you practice this, you make it an actual principle of your life, it becomes so much easier to the point where your energy will give it away for you. Like, you won't even have to communicate your boundaries to people. I mean, it's always a good idea to, just in case, but depending on what your boundaries are, you may not even have to communicate them verbally. Your energy will give it away as you interact with people, as they get to know you more. It's a natural, beautiful process as long as you are comfortable with yourself and you're constantly working on developing these boundaries and understanding who you are and what you are comfortable with and what is not okay with you. Words, actions, your standards in general, your energy, all of these will allow you to convey your boundaries effectively. I'll give you an example for, say, romantic boundaries. I am personally not comfortable with getting into a guy's car for the first time, when you're getting to know somebody. And so when I was asked this, I politely declined and said, hey, I'm not comfortable with being driven, but I'd be totally fine with meeting you in this public space, like XYZ. Something like that. Keep it short and sweet. Keep it straight to the point. You don't have to justify anything excessively. If it's a boundary, that's it. And I can guarantee you the respect for you will go up. People will appreciate when you communicate your boundaries to them because this is a form of healthy communication. It allows you to build healthy relationships and get to know each other in the process. Next up, professional boundaries. So just like you have non-negotiables in your interactions with people, you also need to make sure you're doing this when it comes to work, business, school, anything that requires your labor, because your labor and your time are both valuable. Some non-negotiables for, say, something related to work or business could be related to payment and setting rates. And those are very specific to each individual. And this is where a lot of other research on your behalf comes up, right? Setting your rates, making sure you're not being underpaid, making sure that you are paid and compensated for what your work is worth, or at at least what you think it's worth, contract terms, rights in general in the workplace or anything. Here is an example of protecting your boundaries around your labor. Recently, I was being asked to do a lot more work than I signed up for, and I did not feel comfortable with this at all. I did not feel like I was being compensated fairly. It was not an ideal situation to be in. So I simply responded with, hey there, I have a lot on my plate this month and I really need to prioritize XYZ in my life right now, so I don't think I'll be able to commit to this. That is it. Straight to the point, not being impolite, not being rude, not being mean in any way, but at the same time, I'm not apologetic because I have no reason to apologize. And that is another people pleaser habit that we are getting rid of for good. And respect your time. If you respect your own time, they will respect yours. Now, these individuals actually reached out to me and told me multiple times how much they appreciate my professionalism. This makes you professional. This makes people respect you more, both in the workplace and business and also in your personal relationships. Even if they might not like you, like, we don't care about that. I don't care whether you like me or not. I care whether you respect me and at the very least value and honor my boundaries. Here's another boundary I don't hear people often talking about: work-life balance. So I've been hearing a lot about the 6-day weeks. My goodness, that sounds scary. I've heard of older Gen Z being called in to work on weekends as well, or at least work from home, take work home, do stuff. That is not cool. If you are being asked to work overtime without being compensated for it, if you are being asked to do things that you are not comfortable with, I've also heard of people being asked to do work before they're even hired. Like, they are not guaranteed a hired position. The employers are obviously getting them to do a little bit of work. Oh, just complete this one tiny little task here, and trying to walk all over them. No, they will try to keep pushing your boundaries until you establish it to the point where it's like, this is a non-negotiable. If this doesn't work, I am walking away. This is already too much for me at stake. Like, my self-respect is the most important thing to me out of all of this, okay? My promise to myself is more important to me than the money that I'm leaving on the table, than the person that would be violating my boundaries and making me feel extremely uncomfortable just so I could make them comfortable. Remember, your job is not to make people comfortable at the expense of your own comfort and time and energy and efforts. Be nice, but make sure you're also being nice to yourself in the process, and in fact prioritizing that first, because when you are happy and thriving, then you are only going to make other people's lives better. So going back to that point, make sure you divide your work time with your rest time, okay? This is super crucial, especially if you are self-employed, if you're running some side hustles, or if you're doing extra stuff on the side. Or even if you're working a 9-to-5, whether you're working a minimum wage job, it doesn't matter. The same thing applies. You can still make boundaries based on your circumstances that complement your schedule and allow you to rest and be a human being and recharge so that your work doesn't completely engulf you and drain you. And the funny thing about this is that it's actually going to benefit your employer as well. It's going to benefit the people around you, your team, whoever it is you're working with, because you're going to be more efficient in the long term. You're not going to get burnt out. You're going to be more motivated to keep working because you're not literally being drained of your energy 24/7. Your boundaries benefit you, but they also benefit your relationships and the people surrounding you. And the final, most important is your relationship to yourself and the boundaries that you set within this. Self-boundaries are how you hold yourself accountable. If you can't hold yourself accountable, how can you hold other people accountable when they are not respecting your boundaries? If you don't respect your own boundaries, you are going to have trouble getting other people to respect your boundaries. So it's so important to take yourself seriously and to respect yourself first, to give yourself the treatment that you would like to receive from other people. So one example of a self-boundary that I have is I do not like to engage in gossip or talking behind people's backs. And this is something that makes me feel uncomfortable. That is not the energy, that is not the type of person I want to be. And here's an example of where my boundaries were tested. I was in a group where the girls were lovely, super kind, super helpful. I really like them. However, there was the issue of gossiping. And it was bad because the gossip was so juicy, and it's like, you know, when people, especially in a group, you all kind of start talking, and because there's so many people involved, it's just, you feel more and more self-conscious of kind of getting people to, you know, agree to your boundaries. I can totally see in that situation, like, how it would be difficult for someone, how it was difficult for me to go up to them and be like, hey guys, can we like stop gossiping? Can we stop talking about people? Especially when it was kind of all they talked about. The vast majority of their conversations revolved around this, and it was so juicy that honestly I would find myself indulging sometimes and breaking my habits and promise to myself. That is when you know that it's time to leave. It's time to walk away. And that is exactly what I did. It took me a while, but eventually I distanced myself from those people. Like I said, lovely people, no bad blood, nothing wrong over there. I just knew that for myself, in order to maintain that promise to myself, I had to distance myself. And it ended up working out for the best, because now the current people, the current friends that I have in my life, I feel so safe, like, talking about anything around them. I never feel like I'm going to be talked badly about behind my back. I don't feel like I can't be vulnerable with them. I feel it's like a very safe space that I've created around me. It's smaller, but it honestly feels more like me. It's so crazy to me how that only came once I distanced myself from them and made space in my life for new people. So honor the promises that you make to yourself, because they will benefit you in the long run. You might not see it today, you might not see it tomorrow, but eventually you will see it pay off. So when you set these boundaries, you need to facilitate them. You need to take action to support them. It's not enough to just think it or intend to do it and then not actually follow up on it. So another example recently for me is that I've been trying to reduce my social media consumption because it's been bad. And so one of the boundaries I set for myself was between me and my phone. I was like, I am not going to be using my phone, or at least I'm not going to be going on social media for the first hour of the day. And this is part of self-discipline, getting into a routine, all of this stuff. I can do an episode on any of those if you are interested. So to facilitate this boundary, I stopped using my phone for the first hour of the day. Another thing I did was turn off my notifications. This just helps me keep myself in check and respect the promise that I made to myself. As you begin to set more and more self-boundaries, you'll notice how it impacts you mentally, physically, emotionally, your energy. This is a form of protecting your energy with other people, with yourself. You'll probably notice you might already have some of these boundaries. Maybe you have an idea of what your boundaries look like. Maybe you're just a bit stumped on how to enforce them politely without being rude to people. So go back to those examples that I mentioned. It's like being very factual, right? Because it's a boundary. It's like a non-negotiables. Treat it like you're telling someone a fact. It's like, it's very objective. It's not meant to hurt anybody's feelings. It's simply a valid statement. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I genuinely wish you the best of luck with setting boundaries, because I know it can be uncomfortable sometimes. It's not easy, but it gets easier. I promise you that. And you're gonna notice an energy shift in the people around you. Also, make sure to remember that regardless of the relationship a person has to you, you are still allowed to enforce these boundaries, and we do not make exceptions, especially when they are absolute non-negotiables. This was a requested topic. Let me know what other topics you would like to see, and I will definitely be taking that into account for the next episode. Episodes are out on Sundays, and you can find them on Spotify, Apple, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.